A woman had just moved into her new apartment when she discovered something terrifying. She noticed a shadowy figure in the building across from hers, staring at her, and she immediately suspected that it might be a voyeur. Summoning her courage, she walked over to the window, hoping to get a better look at the figure's face. But just as she did, the lights behind her flicked on. It was only her boyfriend returning home from work. Relieved, she brushed off her suspicion and didn't dwell on it. That night, however, she tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. Deciding to take another look out the window, she was horrified to see that the shadowy figure was still there, staring straight at her. A chill ran down her spine, and she began wondering if it was even a real person. Her boyfriend, noticing her unease, urged her to go to bed early. Not wanting to disturb him since he had to get up for work the next day, she reluctantly complied. The next day, while watching television, a shocking news report aired. A young woman in the apartment building across from hers had been brutally murdered and decapitated. Seeing the victim was about her age, she couldn't help but think of the figure she'd seen watching her the night before. She confided in her boyfriend, pointing out the window to show him where she'd seen the figure. But in broad daylight, the curtains across the way were tightly drawn. Her boyfriend reassured her that she was being overly sensitive, and she tried to convince herself that he was right. The following day, while out shopping, she felt as though someone was following her. When she turned around, a man rushed past, apparently in a hurry, and she brushed it off as paranoia. Wanting to calm her nerves, she went to see a movie. But even in the near-empty theater, she couldn't shake her anxiety when someone chose to sit directly behind her, despite plenty of empty seats. She dared not look back but stole a quick glance at his shoes. When she sensed him leaning closer, her anxiety skyrocketed. Unable to bear the tension, she left the theater and ducked into a busy supermarket, feeling safer in the bustling crowd. While browsing the aisles, she suddenly spotted the same pair of shoes from the cinema. Just as she tried to catch a glimpse of the man's face, he abruptly turned toward her. She quickly looked away, her heart racing, and hurried off, desperately searching for an exit. But the man was also scanning the crowd, seemingly searching for her. Terrified, she accidentally knocked over a jar of pickles, shattering it on the floor. The noise drew the man's attention, and she bolted, hiding in the supermarket storage room. She peered through the glass in the door, trying to get a clear look at him. Later, back at home, she was quiet and uneasy. But her boyfriend, oblivious to her fear, kept talking about work. Finally, she confessed everything, including her belief that she was being followed. He brushed her off, teasing that she was becoming paranoid, even joking about it. But she was in no mood for jokes, still shaken by her experiences. Seeing how serious she was, he offered to accompany her back to the supermarket to review the security footage and see who was following her. The store employee agreed to help them and pulled up the footage. They saw her knocking over the jar and running into the storage room, followed closely by a man. However, her boyfriend dismissed the man's behavior as normal and accused her of overreacting. Frustrated and feeling unsupported, she used her phone to capture a photo of the man's face from the footage. Even if her boyfriend didn't believe her, she trusted her instincts. The next morning, she positioned herself by the window, watching the building across the street. She wanted to confirm whether the man she saw in the store was the same one she had spotted at the window. She spent the entire day watching, but saw no sign of him and began doubting herself. That evening, she was startled by a rapid knock at her door. Nervously peering through the peephole, she saw an elderly woman searching for her lost cat. The woman said she hadn't seen it and sent her away. Soon after, her female neighbor from next door returned home from work. Seeing her alone, the neighbor warmly invited her over for a drink. Grateful for the company, she accepted. They quickly became friends, sharing stories and laughs over drinks. The neighbor, aware of the neighborhood's poor security, revealed that she kept a gun hidden in her coffee table for self-defense. The woman agreed this was wise, given the danger she'd sensed since moving in. Later, back in her own apartment, she was still troubled. Fueled by alcohol and determination, she decided to face her fears head-on and drew back the curtains. Sure enough, the shadowy figure appeared again, watching her intently. Summoning her courage, she waved at him to see if he'd react, and to her horror, he moved, confirming he was real. When her boyfriend returned home, she immediately told him what had happened. But when he checked the window, there was no one there. He scolded her, accusing her of imagining things because she'd been drinking. Exhausted by the constant tension, she decided to call the police. She recounted everything in detail, and the police agreed to confront the man across the street. Her boyfriend accompanied them, while she anxiously waited at home. Half an hour later, he returned, confirming that the man across the way was indeed the same person she'd seen in the supermarket. Still, he tried to rationalize everything, refusing to accept that they were in danger. Feeling completely unsupported, she broke down, insisting she wanted to move out immediately. But her boyfriend refused, arguing that it had taken them too long to find such a conveniently located apartment. The argument escalated into a heated fight. The next morning, he left early for work, leaving her alone and feeling vulnerable. Unable to bear staying inside, she went out for fresh air. To her shock, she spotted the very man who'd been haunting her. Determined to get answers, she followed him discreetly throughout the day. To her surprise, he seemed to be behaving normally, wandering around town without doing anything suspicious. Frustrated and confused, she returned home and barricaded the front door with a chair before bed just in case. As she entered her bedroom, she noticed something strange. Her pillowcase was missing. Suddenly, she was grabbed from behind, a hand clamping over her face, suffocating her. Just as she felt herself about to lose consciousness, she awoke with a start. It had been a nightmare, but then she heard strange noises coming from her neighbor's apartment. Thinking her neighbor had come home, she pressed her ear to the wall. What she heard made her blood run cold, muffled thuds and suspicious noises. Panicked, she pounded on her neighbor's door, but no one responded. Her banging woke up the landlord and other tenants. At her insistence, the landlord reluctantly opened the door with a spare key. Inside, there was no sign of her neighbor, just a broken lamp and a cat, which turned out to be the missing cat from earlier. Embarrassed and confused, she realized she had caused a scene over nothing. Her neighbors were annoyed, and her boyfriend grew even more dismissive of her concerns after receiving complaints from the landlord. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She called her neighbor's workplace, only to learn that she hadn't shown up that day either. As she mulled this over, a man appeared at the neighbor's door, knocking. He introduced himself as her ex-boyfriend and said they'd planned to meet the previous night, but she'd never shown. He assumed she was avoiding him, but the woman insisted that her neighbor hadn't been home at all. He gave her the neighbor's phone number, but when she called, the phone rang inside the apartment, confirming something was wrong. The ex-boyfriend dismissed her suspicions, angry that his ex-girlfriend was avoiding him, and left. She stopped him and pleaded for his help, explaining everything she'd been going through and giving him the apartment number of the man who had been stalking her. He knocked loudly on the man's door, but there was no response, so he left. Still feeling uneasy, she knocked herself, and to her surprise, the door opened. An elderly man answered, not the stalker she expected. Embarrassed, she excused herself and waited for the elevator. Suddenly, the stalker appeared. Their eyes locked, and she quickly ducked into the elevator, terrified. He stared at her menacingly until the doors closed. Later, police came to her apartment. To her shock, they explained that the man across the street had accused her of harassing him and spying on him through her window, and even threatening his elderly father. The officer treated the situation as a neighborly dispute, urging both parties to let it go and shake hands. This left her even more frustrated and helpless. Wanting to distract her, her boyfriend invited her to his company's dinner party. He showed her a news report claiming the suspect in the earlier murder case had been caught, urging her to relax. But looking at the unfamiliar suspect's face, she still felt uneasy. At the dinner, her boyfriend openly joked about her paranoia, and his colleagues joined in, mocking her. Humiliated, she stormed out of the event. On the subway home, feeling utterly dejected, she looked up and froze. The stalker was there. Panic surged through her, and she tried to get off the train, but it suddenly stopped due to a technical issue. She had no choice but to return to her seat. Moments later, the stalker sat across from her. He told her he spent his time caring for his elderly father, and admitted he had a habit of watching attractive women through his window. She barely heard him, her attention fixed on his bag. It was bulging in a way that made her think it contained a severed head. He accused her of humiliating him by calling the police and demanded she apologize. Terrified, she whispered an apology, hoping it would placate him. Eventually, the subway resumed operation, and she bolted from the train, determined to pack her things and leave immediately. When she returned home to pack, she heard music playing from her neighbor's apartment and assumed she'd returned. She found the door unlocked and cautiously stepped inside, only to be horrified by what she saw. Her neighbor was sitting in a chair, wearing pajamas, but her head was missing. Before she could react, she was struck and knocked unconscious. When she awoke, the stalker was holding a knife to her throat. Her boyfriend returned home at that moment, and she tried to cry out, but the stalker slit her throat before she could make a sound. Bleeding heavily, she crawled toward the coffee table, remembering the gun her neighbor had told her about. But before she could reach it, she lost consciousness again. The stalker, relishing his work, admired her like a piece of art. Just as he prepared to finish her off, he noticed a little girl in the building across the street watching him through a window. He realized she had seen everything and decided she would be his next target. He calmly washed the blood off his hands as her boyfriend called her phone, only to hear it ringing inside the neighbor's apartment. Alarmed, he rushed over, just in time to see the stalker leaving. The boyfriend finally realized what was happening and tried to confront him. But before he could act, 2 gunshots rang out, hitting the stalker. The man turned to see who had shot him, only to be struck by another bullet. It was his girlfriend, who had managed to crawl to the coffee table, retrieve the gun, and shoot him. Her boyfriend stood frozen in shock, while she remained eerily calm. She had finally killed the monster who had haunted her life.